Today on Pro Church Daily, we're talking about 5 ways to speak better on stage.
Well, hey there, and welcome to Pro Church Daily, the show where in 10 minutes or less, you're going to get a daily dose of tips and tactics to help your church share the message of Jesus while we try and navigate the biggest communication shift we've seen in the last 500 years. I'm your host, Alex Mills, joined as always by the boss man, it's Brady Shearer, and today we're going to talk about 5 ways to speak better from stage.
Got a DM from a member of Pro Church Nation asking about tips for doing announcements on stage, being a host on stage, really any type of on-stage speaking. And we've talked a lot about video announcements and presenting on camera, but presenting live is a completely different beast.
Oh, so different.
And a lot of the times, the tips of speaking on camera do not carry over whatsoever. Right. And so I wanted to talk about 5 things that I've really focused on to improve my own speaking on stage, and perhaps they can be helpful to some of the listeners, viewers of Pro Church Daily. First things first, if you're watching this episode, you should see on the screen right now the planning center sheet that I get when I'm on service to do the hosting at my church. And so I think this example is from the end of June. I tried to use a somewhat recent one. And if you're listening to this, you can just go to the show notes and watch this version and see it there. But that'll kind of give you an idea of what it looks like when I receive the announcements from my church, because I'm not writing the announcements. They're kind of giving me the bullet points. Here's what we need to cover. And then I'm putting it all together into, ideally, a cohesive moment in service. So first of the 5 tips that we want to talk about is just where you're holding the mic. It's different for everybody because you've got 2 options. You can be holding a handheld mic, or you can be using the lapel.
Which is what I use, and you prefer to hold the mic.
And that's probably just from familiarity, but I prefer the handheld because that means I only have to worry about one hand.
Right.
I feel like I don't know how to do announcements with the lapel because it feels like I'm preaching.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, I guess doing announcements is different than preaching because I do prefer the lapel for preaching. But if I was hosting and doing announcements, I'd probably prefer the handheld.
I feel like the first time I did announcements for this church that I'm at now, they gave me the lapel, and I must have just gone into teaching mode because they never gave it to me again, and I think that's the wise decision.
Let's give Brady the handheld from now on.
So the first part of being a good on-stage host is your audio and making sure that the levels remain consistent and you're not a headache for the person in the sound booth. So for me, I don't have a chin dimple, but if I did, that's where I would press the mic gently up against. And it's a good thing I don't have a chin dimple. You get like some reverb or whatever. But that's where I rest the mic. Yeah. And I think I actually learned that from my youth pastor. That's where I think he always held the mic. And what's great about it is that it's kind of like, I think what they call is a knock. No, that's not the right word. But I did archery one summer. And basically the best, one of the tips, the keys to being a good archer, that's the one, is to always, when you're drawing back the bow, to hold it to the same, maybe there's a special word for it. It's not an anchor, it's not a knock, but whatever it is, it's like you hold it that exact same place every single time, because that way you eliminate the variable of, holding in a different place, your trajectory's all off. Similarly, I hold the mic in the same place every single time against the chin dimple that does not exist.
Yeah, I always wonder when I watch Judah Smith preach, if you've ever seen him preach, he's got the handheld, and I don't understand. He must pay their sound man a lot of money because he will hold that thing down at his waist and start yelling, and somehow it always sounds good. And so his sound person deserves an award of some high degree of merit. But like you said, to deliver that consistent audio and to help the sound person, just having it in that one consistent place, and you hold it on your chin, is going to lend well to that.
So that's the first tip. Second tip, along the same lines of audio, is pitch and pace. Pitch and pace. So now that you found a comfortable resting position, that's going to be your default position for your mic placement and holding, now it's time to actually focus on your voice.
Right.
And if you listen to my voice right now on Pro Church Daily, I'm trying to do the same thing, where the pitch of my voice goes up and down, and so I'll end a sentence and be like, and that's where you hold your mic. And then at the beginning of the sentence, I'll be like, and that's where you hold your mic.
Right.
And this just allows for variety, dynamic range within your own voice. Monotony is the devil when it comes to sitting and listening to a person talk. It is so uninteresting and boring, and it's so much easier to tune out. You're already doing announcements. People are tuning out as it is. Don't give them another reason to do so. And then similarly, with pitch and pace, the first part is pitch, the second part is pace. I will speed up, and then I'll do what's called a pregnant pause.
Nice.
In preacher world anyway. and then I'll slow down. And I'll use pauses very intentionally when I really want a point to hit. So when I'm mentioning the next step for an announcement, I'll be like, and go to the big blue wall in the lobby, and I'll just let it linger for a second because that's what I really want them to care about. When I'm just like breezing through another part of the announcement, I'll make sure that I quicken the pace. And again, mixing it up, variety, pitch, and pace.
And you don't want these variances in like volume and cadence to be too dramatic. Like you don't want to go from like a whisper to like
you're not preaching,
like a full-on yell. But like you said, like a monotone voice, especially during announcements. It's like, I'm already on the verge of falling asleep here anyways. Like just change things up a little bit for me so I can stay engaged.
Precisely. Third tip is transitions. If you look at the Planning Center sheet on the screen, or I'll read it aloud for those that are listening, one of the things that on this Planning Center sheet that I was given is the very first section is called Welcome and Giving, and here's what I'm reading on the Planning Center sheet. It says, welcome, followed by, if it's your first time, you need to know that the reason we do what we do is driven by a deep conviction to, number one, goes on, blah, 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 blah. And again, our vision, and it closes out at the end with like just a harsh ending. And so this was actually a new part of the announcements that we hadn't done before, where they wanted me to, from stage, really dive into the vision of the church and talk about why we do what we do, and partner that with the new visitor welcome. And so this was a new script for me that I had to go outside of my normal routine. And the problem was that I had to start with welcoming new visitors, then jump into the vision kind of casting, and then jump back into the new visitors. And so I had to think through this transition ahead of time, because if you don't think through transitions, it's very obvious that you did not think through transitions. And that is one of the easiest ways to kind of take people out of the moment where they're trying to hopefully take their next step and hear about the opportunities within your church. And if you aren't a good host with those transitions, it's very obvious and awkward. And so I think through those probably more than any other part of the announcements, because a lot of the times with announcements, there's no easy way to make a transition from the men's ministry retreat for man church to like the youth ministry having a movie night. And so you have to find ways to make it natural to go from one to the other.
That's a good one. Hit me with tip number 4. This one is a good one.
Tip number 4 has to do with eye contact. So obviously you want to be working all sides of the room. So don't do that thing where you're staying on one side of the stage and the right side of the auditorium is like, I like this guy. The left side's like, bruh, we're here too. So make sure that you're going, left, center, right, and then back again, but also the depth of the room. Our auditorium is pretty big. You can seat about actually I have no idea how many you can seat. Many people. So I've got to go left, center, and right, but also front and back. So I'm not just looking at the first couple of rows. But then another thing that people don't consider too often is, let's say you have someone else on stage with you. When they're talking, it's very important that you look directly at them. So right now, I'm looking at the camera, like I would be looking out into the auditorium. I'm speaking, and Alex is looking at me, so that when you're watching this, you look at Alex, and you follow Paul as he's following Christ. You look at Alex, he's looking at me, so you also look at me. Same thing when there's a video on the screen. If you're standing on stage and they're playing a video, you need to be looking at that video.
You've seen it 100 times. It doesn't matter.
You need to look at it. You need to laugh at it when there's a funny part. You need to nod your head when there's a good part. You need to be leading the way.
You need to cry when there's a really moving part.
You need to weep uncontrollably. I don't care if you've heard that baptism video 100 times. I don't care if you shot the video. You were in the room. You cried once, you cry again. And the final tip has to do with hand movements. Again, I only have my left hand to use for gestures. There are 3 gestures that I probably go to the most. The first is what I call the windmill.
You've got names for them.
I've got names for them. I thought it would be fun to give some names to them. I don't cognitively go while I'm on stage. All right, do the windmill.
I'm going to do the windmill today. And for this transition, I'm going to do the open hand.
Well, now you're just giving away the names. Okay, so the first one is called the windmill. So I've got the mic in my right hand pressed against my chin. And then with my left hand, I'm kind of like making a circular motion, right? This is just, and we're just keeping things going, right? And you're just following along. And you're getting, just deep into this announcement. You're so ready to take a next step. And then right when I've lulled them, that's when I go into the open hand, where basically
our viewers on YouTube are getting a real treat at the end of this episode.
Okay, so the second one is called the open hand. Basically, this is like, imagine you're worshiping and your hands are like flat, facing this. Like your palms are facing the ceiling, right? So right hand to the chin with the mic, and the second one's just, I'm holding it out. And this is like, you know what? We'd love to have you join us for this men's retreat called Man Church. And then the final one is the stop and pause. So think about if you're at like a middle school slow dance, and someone came up to you and was like, this is how far between you and the Holy Spirit or whatever. This is how much room the Holy Spirit has. So basically, you hold your hand out straight, but you kind of like make this like stop point at the end. And this is where I do the stop and pause. I'll couple this with a stop and pause in my voice. I'm like, so go to the big blue wall in the lobby, and I hold my hand out, and then people are like, whoa, I'm ready to take a next step now.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny when you deconstruct all of these things, but
It's incredible.
Those are 5 tips that hopefully you can use to be a better on-stage presenter.
Nice.
And if you're looking for even more on church announcements, we did this giant guide, everything that I've ever learned from presenting more than 30,000 church announcements. It's called the 2-part Church Announcements Formula, our featured resource for the day. You can find the link for that in the show notes. Thanks for watching this episode of Pro Church Daily. We'll see you next time.
Hey, thanks for watching this episode of Pro Church Daily. Make sure to subscribe to this channel so you never miss another video.
Hey, we like you. You like us.
Maybe.
Did you like this video?
Hopefully.
Why don't you tell us?
Give it a like.